Do you want to drag a chair over here and sit next to me? Okay. Hello, YouTube. This is Lorelei with Stone Cabin Adventures with another episode of Pinky Calhoun. And every time I rock my chair, it jiggles the camera. Sorry. We are back at Mount Magazine, and it is beautiful here. When we got here, though, it was raining so hard that you could barely see. We were at the lodge eating Kevin's birthday dinner, and you could not see anything but this little edge of trees right at the edge of the drop-off. Beyond that, it was just whitish gray with rain. It was crazy. Okay, so episode 19, chapter 15, Pinky Calhoun, No Home. Elmer and I slept on one of the benches with Annie between us. He covered her up with my blue dress because it was the only dry thing we had. We were both cold, but we kept her warm. The fire helped. Pa and Elmer had carried some wood into the cave, but not enough to keep it burning all night long. We'd have to carry in more for the next time. The next morning we got up early and went outside. I thought maybe we came out a different way than we went in because the barn was gone and the chickens and the chicken house were gone and our home and our well were gone. All we had was a hole in the ground. We couldn't even get water. That storm had stole our rope and our bucket. Then I look where our cabin had been, and the weeds that had grown up next to the porch were gone. Nothing but dirt was left. That twister even stole our outhouse and our old poop. The hole where the outhouse used to be was still there, but it was empty. It used to be nearly full. Even the honeysuckle vines that had covered it were gone. Elmer whistled for Patches, and that's when I remembered Pa had taken him. He won't come. Pa took him. Where did Pa take my horse? I couldn't tell him the whole story without crying. I couldn't tell him any of it without crying. Those awful Gateses came here and stole Ma. Pa took Patches to get her back. He said the storm would wipe out their tracks, and he couldn't wait for you to get home. They stole Ma? Why would they do that? He didn't want to believe me. I could tell that by his tone of voice. I could also tell that he thought Pa should have taken him along. Yep, turns out they're even meaner than we thought. I wiped my nose and my tears on my sleeve. I hope Ma guts them both. What are we going to do? Stay here like Pa said? Elmer twisted this way and that. I thought he must be looking for anything familiar. I can't stay here with you girls. I have to help find Ma and bring her back. Pa said, take care of each other and do our best. He waved his arms in a wild windmill. Pa says do our best, and the first thing we do is lose everything. We didn't lose each other or the baby. I had a very selfish moment. You didn't lose my blue dress. He gave me a hug. It lasted a long time. When he could talk again, he changed his mind about chasing after Pa. No, we didn't lose each other. And the root cellar isn't empty, so we won't go hungry. We'll need to plant the garden. It'll be late, but we'll have time to get in a little harvest. When he said a little harvest, I had a vision of a starving Elmer, skinnier than the chicken woman. I grabbed his arm. Do we have any seeds? No, we don't. And if the storm hit Leaking Rock and Walsenburg like it hit here, we can't even buy any seeds. Not that anyone would sell us any. We don't even have a farm for collateral. Well, I didn't know what collateral was, but it sounded awful. Don't we have my 8 little hearts? I saw the muscles at the corner of his jaw bunch up. He ground out the words. I couldn't find your pocket. The storm took it away. I'm sorry, Pinky. I looked for it as long as I dared. Maybe Mr. Gates stole that too. Well, that was a problem I could fix. I pulled up my skirt tail and untied the strings to my pocket. And then I waved my little pocket in the air. I keep it under my dress. Ma said it would be as safe there as anywhere. She was right. He smiled for the first time since we'd seen the destruction. Elmer looked around again. Neither of us could believe everything was gone. We don't have a shovel to redig the garden. We'll walk into town and buy one, if there's a town to walk to. I tried to walk, but my feet wouldn't move. I couldn't even take one step. I guess I thought if I didn't move, it might be a dream. Everything was gone. The twister even stole our grass. Pinky, if Mr. Gates finds out we don't have Pa or Ma, he'll come after Annie. But Billy Joe gave her to us. And Billy Joe's a dafty. And dumb as he is, he knew if he didn't act fast, the sheriff would give her back to Gates. Then I remembered what happened before the storm. Mr. Gates took Ma away. He won't come back after Annie. And if he does, I will shoot him myself. After he's dead, I'm going to shoot him again. I won't even bury him. I will let the buzzards have him. Elmer smiled. You have my permission and my blessings to shoot him as many times as you want. But don't poison the buzzards by feeding him to them. Push him in the river. Let the turtles eat him. I hated to let go of even one of my little hearts, but it had to be done. One of us needs to go after supplies. Since we're walking, only one of us should go to town at a time. Ma and Pa would never send me to town alone. He grinned and said, "That's because you take a dozen little side trips. You will have to hide in the root cellar. Someone's going to try to take over the land if they think we're all dead." We both jumped when we heard a noise. We looked where the noise came from, and it was Bossy standing where our barn used to be. She waited on us, and she mooed again. She was covered in mud from her horns to her tail, but she seemed to be in really good spirits. Elmer milked her into my favorite cup. He used the first cup or two to clean the mud off of her bag. He made me drink a cupful of warm milk, and then he drank one. Last, he helped Annie drink 2 cups of milk. I think she wore most of it. We drank several more cups of warm milk, and that was breakfast. Ugh, a bug landed on my tongue. That's nasty. Pinky, if Walsenburg is torn up or gone, I'll have to go on into Leakin Rock. It'll take me all day to get there. I hate to leave you knowing I might not make it back before dark. You have to take care of Annie and yourself all day with nothing but the odds and ends I picked up in the house. He hugged me tight again. Then he got down on one knee so he could look me square in the eyes. Can you do that? Can you stay here all alone and take care of Annie? We've only got the one pistol between us. Should I take it or leave it with you? I'm not likely to see many people out here. You should take the gun. It will take you more than an hour if you ran fast into town. If the twister took out the bridge, you won't make it at all. The river will be flooding because of the rain. In the end, I agreed to give him 4 days to get supplies and come back. If he didn't come back, I was to see if the Harkins would take us in or if they would let us stay in their mine. I dreaded every second he was going to be gone. I had to keep Annie and myself safe and fed. I reminded myself how very little and how very much work that might be. I gave him one of my little hearts, and he headed into town. He stopped at the top of the hill and waved to me. He waved until I waved back. Annie and I spent 3 crazy days exploring. Keeping us fed turned out to be easy. Bossy followed us everywhere. When we stopped to rest, Bossy stopped too. If either of us felt hungry, I milked out a cup of milk. I wasn't good at it, but I figured out how to get the milk out. It was like we'd become Bossy's herd. It felt weird to be so thankful for that warm milk and so tired of drinking milk all at the same time. Warm milk is not as good as cold milk. I also found a dented pan and 2 forks and 1 spoon. They had not been ours before the storm. I also found Ma's good cast iron kettle, or one just like it. I hadn't gotten to see if hitting Rufus's head had dented her kettle. This one was muddy, but it was in really good shape. I washed it in milk from the cow. Annie and I didn't go to the river. With all that rain and melted hail water, I figured it would be raging and muddy, and I didn't need to see that. I'd seen the river up before this. The little tree where I tied my hook sometimes had been mostly underwater when the river's up. We didn't go because I couldn't bear the thought of losing one more thing. Elmer came back 3.5 days later. I didn't know what he was when I first saw him, so Annie and I hid. I watched from inside our shelter. He looked funny because he had a pack on his shoulders and he pushed a wheelbarrow. He called my name and I recognized his voice. By the time I got out of the shelter, he was screaming my name. He dropped the load off his shoulders and looked around frantically. "I'm here, we're here." He grabbed me and gave me a bear hug. "Come see what I got." He smiled really big then. In the wheelbarrow, with the shovel and several packages of seeds, were other packages tied up with string. One of those packages had my name on it. I put Annie down on my blue dress and what shade there was by what little was left of the one tree we had. That tree had shaded our whole house in the afternoons before the storm. Its branches had been full of bird nests. The storm had turned it into a fat stick with a couple of stubby little branches. "Here," he tossed a package to me. It knocked me over when it hit my chest. I hadn't expected it to be solid. I'd have been mad, but Annie laughed when I landed next to her with a big whoomph. The big tree that used to have a swing in it was now a leafless skeleton. There wasn't enough shade for Annie and me to lay down side by side. We slept in the cave at night, but in the daytime, Annie and I had spent all our time that we weren't exploring under that tree, moving as the shade moved. I untied the knot and slowly unwound the string. Yards and yards of string. I had a ball already nearly as big as Annie's head. Adding this to it would only make it bigger. I tried to make the suspense last a long time. I slowly unwrapped that paper so that I could save the paper like Ma did. Inside, all folded up, I found a ready-made dress. I'd never owned a red dress before, or a brand new one. The ones from Emmy's cousin had been made for her, and besides, Mary had worn all the new out of them. I'm sorry, they only had buttons up the back. I sighed in wonderment and hugged the dress to my chest. I stretched up and kissed his cheek. He'd even bought me some pink fabric so I could make anything I wanted, and soft cotton for towels and diapers for Annie. He bought a rope for clothesline and real clothespins. I giggled when I saw the bucket to milk the cow, but I cried when I saw that quire of white paper. The bottle of real ink and a dozen packages of matches. He knew what I needed, but he got me what I wanted most. I jumped up and hugged him tight. All I needed now was a feather for a quill. Oh, Elmer, this is better than Christmas. I hope you don't mind, but I bought a new boot knife like Pa's. He made some excuse like he could take it back if I really cared, but I studied on it for a moment. Pa used his knife for everything. I figured maybe Elmer would do more work if he had a new knife than with his old one. I smiled up at him. Good plan. He smiled, a real smile then, and wiggled his eyebrows. We should run down to the river to see if you caught the big fish. We can't pull him in. We aren't strong enough, and the river is too wild. Well, we're going to try. I want fish for supper. And Pinky? What, is there more? My hand shook, but I didn't know if it was excitement or fear that caused it. He grinned his old before-the-tornado smile. Now there's more. We still have most of that heart left, so let's go get that fish. His voice squawked. He rolled his eyes. Ma had explained that it was just part of a boy growing up, but he didn't like squawking at all. He handed me his old knife. Here, you may not ever need this, but you might. I'll help you keep it sharp. We can't. I looked around at all of our nothing. He took the knife from my hand and slid it into my boot. I liked the way it felt. It felt powerful. I had a boot full of power to use whenever I needed it. We can wear the fish down. He dropped to one knee in front of me. We need to do our best, Pinky. That means put away your trinkets and start working on supper. Let's go to the creek. I looked around and terror tightened its hand around my heart. We were going to starve to death, all three of us. Annie's pudgy little cheeks would go gray and sunken, and she'd probably die first because babies aren't real sturdy. And more twisters would come and destroy any crops that we planted. The river had probably stole my hook. No one would even know to come bury us. If Ma and Pa ever made it back, they'd find our dried up bodies. I screamed. And I screamed and I screamed and I screamed, and I tried to stop, but I couldn't even open my eyes. Smack! Elmer slapped me. I put my hand on my face. Can we plant the garden tomorrow? Can we make it bigger? I blurted out the words so fast they all ran together. What was that about? I stuttered. I don't want to starve to death. My breath came hard like I'd run for miles. I don't want to watch you and Annie starve to death either. We won't. His smile faded. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It is going to be hard. But we are going to be okay. I don't want to see you and Annie shrivel up to nothing. He laughed at me. Pinky, we'll be okay. I promise. Mom and Pa will be home soon. Maybe even tomorrow. When can we start the new garden? We'll start the garden when we get back with the fish. I'll stay here with Miss Pea Pants, and you can go hide your new treasures in the cave. Annie reached her fat baby arms out to him. I didn't even get to vote on this. I didn't remember the walk to the river being so long, not even when I carried a basket of laundry. But we walked the trail made by the twister. Well, made by one twister or another most of the way. Those tornado paths zigged and zagged. We walked to the top of one hill to see the damage better. We could see the twister path and debris going on for miles. I pointed to some buzzards circling low. Elmer made me stay back a ways, and he went to look. He never said a word. He just jerked his head toward our house and walked off. We walked back and got the shovel. Finally, he broke to the silence and said the words that I didn't want to hear, but I knew he was going to say. I don't want you to see what I saw. I'll bury him, but I don't want you out of my sight again. Who is it? I'm not sure. It's a young boy, one boot, striped coveralls. Is it one of the Gosling boys? Maybe. I don't know for sure. He might be one of the little twins. He's about the right size. The buzzards made a mess of him. I went to Leakin Rock. I didn't want anybody in Walsenburg to know that we'd been hit or that Ma and Pa were gone. No one would believe they hadn't been killed in the twister if they're missing. I went around Walsenburg and never even looked to see if the twisters had gone that way. I don't know who survived and who didn't. My voice barked out my surprise. One of the twisters? How many were there? He inhaled sharply. I don't know, Pinky. I guess dozens. Most of them weren't as big as that one that wiped us out. At one place, its path was over a mile from side to side. It got close to Leakin Rock. They've had their share this year. This whole corner of Colorado has had our share. We need to take that body into town. I'm not pushing it in the wheelbarrow. We can tell them where it is. If they want what's left of it, they can come and get it. We'll leave a marker. He's bad torn up. It's so bad I don't even want to go back and bury him. I'm going to dig a hole. You're going to gather rocks. When I get him in the hole and covered up, you can bring rocks. I don't want the coyotes to dig him up. I agreed. It was a horrible plan for a horrible time. I could smell that dead boy, but Elmer made sure I didn't see his face. I hated putting rocks on him, but Elmer fixed that. He took a piece of my pink fabric and covered what was left of the little boy's face. Then Elmer shoveled dirt into the hole. When he was buried and covered in rocks, Elmer quoted the 23rd Psalm. I said the Lord's Prayer. We sang a little bit of Amazing Grace. And I prayed we wouldn't find any more bodies before we got to the river. I sat at the top of the bank and watched Elmer make his way down to the water. It had gone down some, but he still had to wade to get to the rope. I thought we hadn't caught anything until he got close to the hook. Then the fight was on. Elmer sat down straddling the tree so that fish couldn't pull him in. I could tell it wasn't the big fish that nearly ate me, but this fish would feed us for days. We have to figure out a way to smoke the meat in order to save part of it. Elmer dragged it up on the bank by me. I stretched out next to it, glorying in the unbelievable size of the thing. It growled and flipped and slung muddy slime on me. I decided it weighed as much as 10 annies. Elmer argued it only weighed 5 annies. But he cut it open and gave me the bubble. He used part of the guts to rebait the hooks. I looked at the rest of the guts and for the first time since the twister, thought about Buddy and Fatty in words other than loss. I yelled out, "Bugs! Bugs! Bugs, 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 bugs!" When they didn't answer, I knew they were gone. But 10 minutes later, they come a-woofing and a-racing towards us through the shallows and up the hill. The world's goofiest smile stretched itself across my face. We gave them the rest of the guts and the tail, and they followed us part of the way home. When we didn't give them any more fish, they quit following us and went to catch their own. We could hear them splashing and playing in the river. I relaxed a little, knowing they were happy. I hollered out, "Hey!" It surprised me and Elmer. I laughed out loud. "Sorry, I have an idea." It was the first idea I had had since the twister. We can build a soddy. Pa and his friends built a soddy for you and Ma when she decided she wanted to settle here. We can build us one and use it for a smokehouse. That way, this fall when we butcher Buddy, we'll have a way to make bacon. Until then, we can smoke fish in it. It'll take days to build it. We walked back to our missing cabin. I pointed to Ma's missing garden. "Well, you shovel up the garden and I'll plant it. While I'm planting, you can start digging the hole for the smoking soddy." I was so proud of my idea, I decided to write it down on one of my pieces of white paper. I began looking for a flat rock or an old board to use as a desk. That was how I found the next body. This one looked like it lived a while after the twister. I saw the path where it had dragged itself hundreds of yards. It was face down and I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. It was naked and mud-caked. Elmer turned me around and sent me after rocks. And then we heard it groan. We looked at each other in horror. How could it still be alive? The twisters had been days ago. It must have drank water out of puddles. Elmer grabbed me by my shoulders. Don't let the buzzards get it. You got a great arm. Kill as many of them as you can. I'm going to Walsenburg and get help. Oh, if there's any help there. If not, I'll come back. He squeezed me tight and kissed my head like Pa used to do. I looked at the sky. Burying that other body had taken time. Elmer might make it to town and back before dark if he ran, but not if he found a wagon to haul whoever this was. In less than a minute, he was back and racing off in the other direction. Harkinses are closer. I'm going there. If they're there. If not, we'll know. He didn't even stop to talk. I had to run next to him to hear him. I stared after my brother for a long time. How could he bear to know? Thank you for listening. The weather here has held off raining while I videoed this, but it was pouring buckets in sideways earlier today. So, we are here at the majestic Mount Magazine State Park, and it is a lovely July afternoon. Y'all be blessed. Have a wonderful day. Remember, Jesus loves you, and so do we. Mwah.